facts are non-sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.
Well, it's not exactly the most ideal way to start a show, but moments before we came live on the air here, we just learned that there exists somewhere this thing called Steve's Naughty List. And what that entails or how you get to be a part of that, I have no clue, and I don't really want to know. But Steve,
I want to be
do you
there.
want to?
First of all, I thought that was going to be a private conversation, but none of you are on my naughty list, I assure you. So be secured about that at least. We're not going to talk about my naughty bits, my naughty parts, or my naughty list. Okay.
That's cute that you thought this was going to be be private. You know that's.
Oh, nothing's ever private between us. But by the way, can we at least tell everybody? Hope they all have a Merry Christmas.
Yes.
And a happy soon to be happy New Year.
Absolutely. Are you doing Steve's recap of the year again?
Yeah, I'm going to do something. I always do, but I think I'm going to not do it on New Year's though. I might do it like either New Year's morning or the night before, because I guarantee it. Because there's so many more people in the community now. They're going to have like 50,000 people doing stuff on New Year's night. So yeah, I'm going to break tradition and either do it really, really, really early or do it the night before.
That makes sense. Let's say hello to our guest really quick, and then I'll go over what we've got coming up for the week. Hello, Gray Skeptic Mac. Welcome back. I believe this is your second time, I believe, right?
That's right.
Well, welcome back. And then below him, we have Modern Day Hysteria. Welcome back to you as well, sir.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be back.
It's good to have you back. Okay, so for this week, we have actually, Steve, I'm going to let you tell them about Dr. Prothero tomorrow, since you know you're well versed in his area.
Well, Dr. Prothero is a very well-known paleontologist. He's agreed to come on and kind of talk to us a little bit about the field of paleontology. I think he specifically majors in the Cenozoic area, if I remember correctly. But he's also done a lot of things with radiometric dating, and he's a real big name in paleontology. So to get him on was just really, really. I was really surprised because I know he's been on the Hangouts before. I've actually talked to him in a Hangout before, but.
We have a lot.
Are you familiar with Stephen J? Are you familiar with Stephen J. Gould, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah, Stephen J. Gould and him used to work together.
Oh, that's cool. We have quite a few different shows this month actually that center around dinosaurs. We've got Trevor Valley coming back. We've got Dr. Grady McGurty. Which Grady McGurty is going to be with us here in a couple of weeks, and we'll be talking dinosaurs and when they were here.
Yeah, but he's like the next generation of Hovind, sort of. He's very, very similar to Hovind.
You think? Speaking of which, do you want to announce listen, guys? I'm gonna let Steve tell you about the show that we've got coming up, but this is the best thing that has ever happened. I don't know how this happened, but I am so excited about what he's getting ready to tell you. Like there is not going to be a more. You just can't miss it. Okay, so Steve.
Well, I don't know how this came about, but we've somehow managed to arrange a discussion between Kent Hovind, the guy that started Free Hovind. Remember back when he was in prison, there was a thing for freeing Hovind. So him and that guy are going to come on, and they're going to be discussing tax evasion with Negation of P and Nate Brody. I mean, I don't know how we made this happen. I'm still kind of working out the details, but this was actually something that Hovind kind of brought up, and
that's too good.
I have no words. I have no words for how how unbelievably amazing that is. A tax discussion with Kent Hovind. Like the stream gods have like descended upon us.
Right.
He has never. You know what's funny is he's never talked about it to have any real consequence, right? I mean, I think he'll make a snide remark about it, right? He'll be like, "I don't want my tax dollars going to evolution," and then somebody will say, "Well, you don't pay taxes." But he's never really, that I recall, I've ever heard him talk about him somehow not breaking the law, because he's arguing now that he was not structuring, and that even if he was structuring is not a federal offense, and that he wants actually his conviction to be overturned and pardoned by the governor.
I'm pretty sure.
He
I'm
just
pretty
sounds
sure
so
that it
much
is.
like Donald
I'm
Trump.
pretty sure it's an offense. I'm pretty sure it's an offense because he got tried for it and then sentenced, served his time. I'm pretty
Persecution.
Pretty sure that that's
Religious persecution. They were scared of him.
It's amazing to me because, and I'll say this and then we'll get started. But it's amazing to me that he's actually coming back, because for the past several months I've been trying to get him to come back on, and out of the blue he just decides that he wants to do a tax discussion on this show. And so, I mean, welcome back, Kent. We would. I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
why not,
If
right?
I can just say real quick before we jump into it,
Sure. Yeah.
one thing that Ken Hovind is great for is making great shirts. So
Oh, nice, nice shirt. Nice shirt.
You know what? I still
I
don't
didn't
think he
even notice that.
understands the whole concept of the shirt.
Huh?
I didn't either, because I only said the top part of it till he stood up.
Yeah.
I don't think Owen gets that at all. I don't think he still understands that. But whatever. But how is the shirt? Is it nice? Does it fit well?
Mac? Have you
Have you
worn it
worn
out
it out? Has
anywhere?
anybody asked you?
Just once or twice. I took it with me when I went to the Godless Island's wedding. But I had just gotten it like a week or so before that. So I've only had it for
I was
like
wondering
a
if
month and a
anybody gives you any funny looks. Like, what in the hell is that guy doing with an elephant in a
Oh.
pine tree on his?
half. I actually wore
Yeah.
it to Thanksgiving. I just remembered, and my brother like pointed out. He's like, "Huh, that's funny."
Is your family believers?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Did you explain to him what it was about, or just
I
didn't want to go there?
I didn't really get into it, but he saw
Yeah.
he saw NonSequitur and saw the elephant and the pine tree. And he was like,
yeah,
I like
it
that.
does work that way. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we've got coming up, and then on Friday we've got Christy Winters at 4 p.m. That's 4 p.m. That's not going to be our usual time. Okay, so that's right in the middle of the afternoon. She'll be talking with Sergey. I believe that's how you say his name. Sergey, something like that. Who owns incels.me, the largest forum of incels. So it's going to be the top incel versus one of the top feminists, and I think this is going to be very. What's the word? What's the term you theists use? Fruitful. It's going to be a fruitful discussion.
We're going to
use that
plant some
word. I'm
seeds. thinking more volatile. I think more like a gasoline fire, or,
Nah, Steve. Class.
I like
it's
her
a new
though.
year.
I actually like her. I
New year.
listened to her. She's actually very good in discussions.
Yeah. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about Pascal's wager, and these two are going to be having a discussion. I assume this is just me assuming. You can tell me differently or not, but you guys just are going to have a open back and forth. You don't want timed rounds, that sort of thing, right? You just want to have a conversation.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, depending on how open Gray Skeptic is, we could even have like a lot of Q&A during it, because I didn't really give Gray Skeptic a ton of time to review my videos on this. So I'm open to whatever you guys prefer.
Sure. Doesn't matter to me. Whatever.
We
Greg
prefer you
wants to do.
concede it now and just admit it's a bad argument, and we can move on and go drink something.
Very good, Steve. Well,
why we got you, Modern Day Hysteria, talking now? Go ahead and introduce yourself. Say a little bit about who you are and where people can find more of you. Go to Gray Skeptic, and then we'll jump into it.
You bet. So my name is James, and I love the topic of philosophy of religion as well as decision theory, which is you could say, incorporated into Phil religion tonight. And I am over at it now. It's actually, we changed the name to Modern Day Debate. We're doing a lot of debates now. And I have to say, I am so thankful to be here. For everybody viewing, first, thanks for your patience. I was the reason we were late. But second of all, this channel has produced so much content. Some of my favorite channel or debates on the internet are here at NonSequitur. Astrophysicists like Hugh Ross. I mean, you guys got big time stuff. So people in the audience, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. They've got so much good content, and I'm really glad to just be back here with you guys.
How can you not like him? How can you not like him? Really?
I know, right? You know what? You make me a believer.
Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, thank you for those kind words. By the way, I wanted to address something in the chat. Yes, my tongue is blue. Thank you for that. I made the mistake of eating an airhead before we went live. I wasn't thinking. So yes, my tongue is blue.
Is that what you
Nothing
call
is
your
bad.
boy?
I'm telling you, we've got the smartest live chat out there. Like no one beats our live chat. No one. So yes,
On the,
stay
what the hell's an
vigilant.
airhead?
Stay vigilant. You don't know what an airhead is?
What the hell is it? Oh.
Define
Is it a
airhead.
candy?
Airheads.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've ever seen it.
What'd you think? I was eating Debbie.
I thought he was joking.
Oh,
I thought you were blowing a
Come on.
Smurf.
That would
You
bring
saying-
new meanings to the words "little Debbie's." But anyway,
Oh,
all right. Thank you very much for those kind words. Modern Day Debates. Gray Skeptic Mac, please tell us about you.
All right. What's there to know? I'm the Gray Skeptic. I have my own YouTube channel called Gray Skeptic. You can find me on Twitter at Gray Skeptic Mac. You can find me on Facebook. I do a lot of interviews with atheists as their former theist selves. It's a series I call Atheist Flashbacks. It's very fun. Actually, Kyle and Steve have both been on. So if you want to see them being theists, they're both very fun conversations. Also, I do a few just like thought-provoking videos, and I have a few video responses, which I want to do more of those. I also have a new show with Christy Santiago, who is always in the chat. She's here right now. It's the LEA podcast, which is LEA stands for League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism. Nice long name. So we're doing that. It has news, and we try to apply reason and logic to politics and religion. Try.
I'm an admin in that group too, so be afraid.
True story.
How dare you, sir?
True story.
I'm still an admin in that group. Yeah, I love that group. That's a great group, though. I have fun in that group. It's
Okay,
fun.
so who wants to kick us off in
So
this discussion on Pascal's?
I would love to start just to kind of give a broad overview, and then I can get Gray Skeptic's ideas. I'm excited to hear all of your guys' ideas. So I am aware that this is the most hated argument in this topic more broadly. And so it's with great honor that I am bringing it here to you tonight. And maybe even if I can't get you to be persuaded tonight, although I'm going to get Steve. Steve's going to be a fan of the wager by the end of the night. Nonetheless, maybe the rest of you will say, oh, okay, it's maybe not as bad as I thought. So the basic argument, I would admit, Pascal's wager in its original form didn't really get you very far. So in particular, it had some significant gaps. And in particular, the biggest one, I think, is that it doesn't get you to a particular religion. And so I would just like to take the more modest position tonight to argue that based on decision theory, just the idea that if we boil it down, normative decision theory would say that rational agents maximize their utility or they maximize their own preferences. That using decision theory in conjunction with Pascal's wager in a more contemporary form, we do have good reason to adhere to a particular religion of one of many different types rather than atheism. So that's the stake I'll put in the ground. And just because, so in other words, taking a more modest version of it. And the second reason that, or I should say the second point I want to make is that it's really important that you remember that you multiply your probability for a particular outcome by its potential reward or cost. And so if you have an infinite or near infinite, because I know someone is going to bring up the fact that you maybe can't plug an infinite into the decision theoretic equation, you nonetheless, even if you use a finite number, as long as it's big enough to swamp or take your tiny credence with Christianity to a maximal reward, then which any sort of heaven outcome can swamp any sort of atheistic outcome because there's no afterlife with infinite bliss. That when you multiply the probability, even if you give Christianity a 0.001% probability, when you multiply it by a trillion, gazillion, quadrillion, bazillion units of utility, this eternal afterlife, you're going to have a huge reward that's going to swamp atheism. Because, like I said, atheism can't provide an eternal reward in the afterlife. Does that make sense more broadly?
I see what you're saying. That makes sense, yes.
So it at least seems coherent, even if there are other issues you have a concern with. So I think we can start with that, and I'm ready to take some of the objections. I think I'll just leave it up to you, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, in terms of what your main concerns are, why we shouldn't be religious rather than an atheist.
Well, first I'd like to point out a couple things that you said so far. Is that cool?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Because you said when we're trying to decide, if this is a valuable argument, right, and a valuable thing to consider when we're trying to decide should we be Christian or not, right, or religious. Do you want to say Christian or religious?
Religious more broadly.
Okay, more broadly. Okay. One of the things we need to throw in the probability equation is it, what do we get the most satisfaction from? Like, are we going to get this eternal bliss, or are we going to get nothing, right? But the issue that I have with that is that in no way does that tell you is it true or not. Like, I feel like that really shouldn't be part of the equation. I feel like the biggest issue is it true or not? Or is it probable to be true or not? And I feel like that shouldn't really be part of the probability. How do you feel about that?
I think I see what you're saying. I don't want to cut you off. Do you still have another point you wanted to add? I don't want to jump in too early.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we're in the same boat there, Mac. Like, we agree that we should keep distinct what might be considered evidential versus decision theoretic reasons. And by decision theoretic, I mean just pragmatic. So in this case, I would concede that even if you have a 0.1% probability for Christianity, you say the evidence just isn't there. I would say there's another good reason why you ought to believe something, because we not only have this, you could say, standard of rationality that compels us to follow the evidence where it leads. We also do have a standard of rationality that compels us to maximize our own preferences according to decision theory. And we would agree that they are distinct. And so I would concede that, even if you have no evidence for Christianity, I would say you're right, separate issue. I'm only going for the more pragmatic route of trying to suggest that we have a good reason in order to maximize our own utility as rational agents to become religious, to believe in it, because our expected utility in the big picture of the afterlife will be higher with a religion.
Okay. So I have a few questions then there for you. Is first, what do you mean by pragmatic? Do you mean just like, is it useful? Or yeah?
I think that, strictly speaking, I want to keep anchoring it to decision theory, namely in maximizing our own preferences that maximize our own utility or pleasure, or happiness. Pleasure has a negative connotation because happiness is also fulfillment or meaningfulness.
Okay. Well, my train of thought here. Sorry. So I wonder, because an eternal like life of worshiping any kind of God doesn't sound like any kind of a bliss to me and a lot of people. Like I think most people will just like get sick of it like within the first day or at least a week, right? So it doesn't really sound like bliss. As Christopher Hitchens said, it sounds more like a divine North Korea. But in North Korea, at least you can die and you're done. But God's not done with you because He has you for eternity. And if you have any kind of thought outside of, or want, if you have any desire outside of heaven, then I feel like that would be sinful. And what happens then? Like, because like once you're in heaven, do you stay there forever, or can you just mess up and be thrown into hell at any time? Like, I feel like it raises a lot of questions. And I can't remember the other point I was going to make.
You can come back to it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let me know if it pops into mind, and that way we don't forget it. Because I know that feeling of where you don't want to let a good idea get lost again. So I'll try to address your first comments, and I think that you can correct me because I might accidentally not recognize the nuance or the fact that there's maybe a couple of objections rolled up in your response. So one would be that, well, maybe if we went to this heaven with this God, we wouldn't really be happy. And so, for singing kumbaya or, something like that doesn't sound very pleasant to me. I think that, I don't want to straw man either. I know you didn't say we were literally singing kumbaya, but the point is, you think worshiping a God in heaven doesn't sound very fun, for example. That might be especially displeasurable. But I think that you're saying that if we assume, for the sake of argument, that this heaven exists, it could be bad. That's, for me personally, or you personally, that's basically the gist of the argument, right?
Right, yeah, because there's 100 different versions, and I'm lowballing it. There's 100 different versions of heaven, right? When you were talking to T-Jump, which I just found today, he said, what if there's an atheistic God, who like a God that exists, but like lets you into heaven for like critical thinking and like thinking like an atheist, right? So it's like it'd be the opposite. Like, so you'd all go to hell, right? All the theists would go to hell, and we'd all go to heaven to have philosophical discussions and like critical thinking.
Yeah. So I think that that's maybe a different objection, but nonetheless an important one that I want to give a response to. But for your initial one, I would say, if we assume for the sake of argument that there is this God, and we say, but we may not enjoy the heaven of this God, is that if there is this God, though, and it's omnipotent, like it could change what we happen to find fulfillment in, or it could give us maybe just by some sort of supernatural intervention, it could give us like an increase of dopamine or serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitters that make us enjoy heaven. And so I'm not sure that couldn't be the case, but for the other one, with regards to the atheist favoring God, if there's a God that says, I'm actually going to reward those who happen to be atheists, and so if you happen to believe in a religion, you go to hell instead, I think that's an important objection. I think it's really, you could roll it into the many gods objection, namely, well, which God do we bet on in that case? I think that what you have to do at that point is, to be consistent with decision theory, you still have to use a decision theoretic solution. And what I would say is, we shouldn't just look at the cumulative or the grand total of utility that we would get from a particular decision. But in heaven, we might also say, well, how many units of pleasure would I get per day? So let's say, because it's heaven, you get 100 units of pleasure per day. And then you multiply that 100 units by the religion or worldview, like this atheist favoring God type of worldview. You multiply the 100 units of pleasure per day by the probability that you have for the particular worldview. And the one with the highest probability, when you multiply it against 100, will give you the one you should go with. And to me, it seems pretty difficult to say that you have a higher probability in an atheist favoring God compared to any religion, because what evidence is there for an atheist favoring God? Can you see me?
We can't hear you,
Yes,
Matt.
can you
Is
hear me?
his mic not working? Yeah, Grace. Yeah, I don't know. Was his mic not working?
I can
No,
hear you now.
I
Sorry about that.
turning off and on, so I keep
Oh, it
muting
wasn't your
and
fault.
forgetting.
Yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
your fault,
It
indeed.
was totally my fault. Totally my fault. But the so yeah, that's about perfect because like there would be no evidence of an atheist favoring God if he was like divine in that way. But so you keep talking about decision theory, and I don't know much about it. Like I'm just going off by like by what you say. But what do you use to make decisions? Like, do you use evidence? Do you use the probability of pleasure or pain? Like, how do you make a decision? And I feel like that's what we need to plug in here to like make the right decision. But we'll go off that before I continue. So like how
Yeah.
would you answer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that decision theory, if you boil it down to a single axiom, it would be that you maximize your own preferences, or which presumably would be happiness. So if you want to be fulfilled and happy, that's the option you should go for. So in the same way that I want to go to, let's say I want to get married because there's good data to suggest that married people might be happier on average. It's debatable, but I think the evidence is on that side. I would say, well, that's one reason why I want to get married, is that I think it'll probably be a more fulfilling life for me. So in the same way, I also would choose a religion.
Okay, so you make decisions off of evidence and also pleasure, but you can test that like if you're going to get married. I don't know if you believe in divorce or not, but if you're going to get married, you can evidentially see if it's going to work out, if it's actually going to make you happy, or if that person is going to make you happy, or if anyone's going to make you happy, right? Like you can use that evidence to then go forward with more decision making, whether stay with these decisions that you've made or change your mind and make a life change.
You
you would
can't have
mostly go off.
certainty, but you can have Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
So you can't have certainty. You could only kind of have a probability guess. Like the truth is, I could end up marrying somebody that turns out to be not quite what I expected, and then I'm really screwed. I might be in it for the long run, but I'd nonetheless have a probability assessment that would say, when I multiply that probability and basically by the outcome and potential cost, I would say it looks like it's beneficial.
Okay. Well, I want to change gears just a little bit, and I wanted to backtrack just a little bit and let you know that like I used to be a theist. I used to be a devout Christian, and Pascal's wager made a lot of sense to me. Like I was happy I was on like the winning side, right? I'm just like, oh, thank goodness, I believe I'm fine. But I could probably use this and use this argument to coerce other believers to believe like me and like save their souls, right? Like that's what it's good for, at least in your eyes, right?
Did you say that you could use this argument for what was it for? Sorry.
To I said coerce, but to help other people see it's better to believe than disbelieve.
I think Pascal failed in thinking that it gets you to Christianity in particular, but I do think that on a decision theoretical basis, you have a reason to prefer pretty much any religion over atheism. So maybe not Christianity,
Right.
though, but
Well, any religion that has an afterlife, right? Is it?
Yeah.
Or is it just any? Okay.
You're right. Thank you.
Yeah. There was a note that I made, and I thought it was interesting. And let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I cannot say the name. Steve will probably recognize it. Soren Kierkegaard. Is that right?
Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard. Yeah. He came up with a theism, and he said that it's theism. Thank you. Sorry. I believe because it's absurd to believe. He thought that the beauty in believing in God was that it takes faith. Like you can't come at it with evidence. It's more or less wrong to. You should just believe because faith. Like you should just believe because you should believe. You should believe in God. Like that's the beauty in it. There is no logic behind it. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I happen to think there's both decision theoretic and also evidential reasons to believe. So I don't think I like that at all.
I don't think that, no? Okay. Okay. And I mean, I don't either. I think you should look at evidence and you should look at reason to to try to make the decisions that help you through your everyday life. And as far as atheism goes, for me, it's a good decision because it looks like the most true decision, and not because it's the most pleasurable, or it keeps me from the most pain. Because if I'm going to hell, that's pretty much said, not in the Bible specifically, but it's said that it's like the worst place. Like you don't want to be there, even if it's not for the heat, it's for the humidity. Sorry, I'm hearing noises on. Go ahead.
I think I got the last part that you said, where you had said that you wouldn't want to. For you, it sounds like you're saying you're an evidentialist and you're not a decision theorist, because if you're an evidentialist, that means that you would be a person who says we should only look at the evidence. That's the only thing that should influence our beliefs, period. And I wouldn't be that way myself. I think that we probably should have an answer for why we're going to be picking evidentialism and ignoring decision theory. Because if you were also a decision theorist, which seems like a reasonable thing, I mean, it seems pretty axiomatic that rational agents maximize their own preferences. Like that, that seems like it is pretty self-evidently true. So, for example, if I wanted a bowl of cereal and I made a bowl of cereal and I set it on the table in front of me and then I slap it off the table, that seems pretty irrational. And the reason is because I thwarted my own purposes, we might say, right? And so that's what I mean by the axiomaticness of decision theory. I think that, and I think you're taking a good position. I think that it is actually one in which it's much better than a lot of the other objections in which you might say other things. But I want to know why, because I think that you do have two standards or norms of rationality, and they seem to be in head-on collision in this unique case, because they're usually not in collision with each other, right? Because oftentimes believing in the things that happen to be true will actually give you the best expected utility. In other words, like evidence oftentimes correlates positively with decision theory, or with you could say maximizing utility. But in this case, it doesn't, and we have to have a reason to pick one over the other. And the only reason I can think of is we have these two norms of rationality, and we basically have to say, what are we going to use to make the decision on which one to pick, in this case, when they disagree. And it seems like we couldn't apply an evidentialist standard because it's just not even meaningful to ask the question, where does the evidence point? It's like, well, wait a minute, what do we mean by where does the evidence point? Like, in terms of what we're supposed to choose. But we could apply decision theory, and we could say, well, we use decision theory to say, well, what would give us the most, satisfaction in this case? And that reason would give us like one that's consistent with decision theory, and it would give us a reason to prefer decision theory, since that's the one we use to break the tie. So it seems like we would have a reason to go with decision theory rather than evidentialism.
So, like I said, I don't know much about the decision theory, and I'm not going to pretend like I do pretty much at all. So, but it sounds like you're saying in decision theory, we just use logic and reason. Like for Pascal's wager, we would want to look at, do we want to chance just being in the ground after we die, or do we want to look at not just the ground, but you go deeper, you go down to hell, or you go up to heaven and you have this eternal bliss. So which one would I rather have? Looking at those three options, right? I'm like, well, I'd rather have, it has the most logic to want eternal bliss, rather than ending up just in the ground or down in hell, metaphorically down in hell. Am I?
I think I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure. So tell me if I've got you wrong, okay? If we say,
Okay.
if we prefer it in the short term, like, do you mean like you could mean it either like right now, I prefer this atheism because it seems more reasonable or rational. And then we could also say maybe we prefer it in an eternal sense because, like, do you mean like it would be you'd prefer to live in a universe that seems more rational to you, like theistic worldviews, like religious worldviews? Are you saying like they don't seem rational to me, and I prefer to live in a worldview that does seem more rational? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not talking anything about preference right now. What I was trying to get at is with your decision theory, I'm trying to equate it with just like logic and reason. Like, is that a fair thing to do? Is just be like, this is a logical, reasonable way, or like not way. This is a logical and reasonable decision to make. Is that a decent way to?
I think, well, decision theory would say it's the optimally rational one. So it's more rational than atheism.
Okay. And why do you find it more rational than atheism? I think is a question I have.
Oh, okay, yeah. So maybe like what evidential reasons do I think there are to prefer a religion versus atheism?
Not even just evidential. Since you're using decision theory, I would want to know more on your terms.
Yeah,
why you would
on a decision theoretic sense, it would be both a long-term and short-term maximization, attempted maximization of utility, where in the long term, I'm thinking, if this religion has a potential payout that's greater, then I would find that more satisfying with eternal bliss. And in the short term, I might argue that this is a little bit different, but I guess I'm trying to give you the full-fledged answer. I think that a person would be more happy on this planet as a devoutly religious rather than atheist.
Okay. So to me then, that would, have you ever seen The Mummy? Like the first one with Brendan Fraser?
Brendan Fraser, yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then he has a really shitty friend, Benny. Do you remember him?
Is it the guy with the English accent?
More like an Arabic accent.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Not Jonathan, not Eve's
Okay,
brother, but
gotcha.
like the one who kind of goes like and like serves the mummy halfway through the movie. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I feel like he really takes Pascal's wager to heart. And he has a crucifix, and he has like 5 other like necklaces with like different pendants on him. So when the mummy comes out and he's like about to like eat him, he like prays in like 5 different languages until he gets to the language of the Jews, which the mummy says, "Oh, the languages of the slaves. Great, you can serve me." So like it saves his butt because he believes or at least adheres to different religions. So using your own decision theory, are you just a Christian, or do you try to adhere to different and multiple religions to kind of keep yourself safe and kind of pick the best, safest decision?
Yeah, so good question. That's great. The reason that I am only a Christian, in particular a Protestant one, is because I've made it simple so far because we've only talked about maximizing bliss, you might say. But when you figure in the potential for the negative, the other side, of course, namely, well, what if I bet on the wrong religion? And what if I end up in Allah's hell? That would obviously be unfortunate. So you have to, in that case, you have to also consider your probabilities with all the different potential hells. But for my argument tonight, I would say that nonetheless, atheism doesn't have a. I mean, I'll answer your question, but I just want to make sure we don't go off track because I was maintaining that any religion is better than atheism, and atheism doesn't have the threat of any sort of potential punishment. So that would obviously be one that I'll always avoid because let's say I bet on atheism, well, then I know for sure I can't get an infinite reward. And I know I'm at risk of one greater potential hell outcome because if I go from being a Christian to an atheist, now I'm not only in risk of going to all the hells of all the other religions besides Christianity, but when I become an atheist, now I'm at risk of all the hells of all those other religions plus the hell of Christianity. And so atheism is the maximally bad strategy.
Gotcha. So to that, I'd say I very much disagree. And maybe it's because I'm an atheist and you're not. You don't see the positives and negatives that I do. And those would be one, eternity is just your life. Like you just have this one life. So then the negative is dying any kind of early. Like you want to try to make the best out of this life that you can. And you want to not have it end too early. That would be the worst possible thing because then you don't get to experience any good or bad after it. You're just done. And the only thing you get to take with you, or like as you're dying, is people I love are going to be sad about this. And I feel like that would be one of the last things that I think, and that would be hell on earth. Like that would be awful for me. Is me knowing that my loved ones are going to miss me and be in agony for a while. So, like you still have positives and negatives in this way, and you can make your life better or worse, and you have to use logic and reason and evidence to make your decisions to get through life. Do you see what I mean?
I think I get what you're saying. So maybe if somebody were to argue, well, maybe my life is so much more fulfilling on Earth as an atheist compared to if I were a religious person, that it outweighs the potential reward of a religion in the afterlife. But I don't know, or maybe you're saying maybe this is, if I'm wrong, let me know if that's not what you're saying.
That's not quite what I'm saying. That's a little bit of a straw man to me. I'm saying more of it's not that. I don't think atheism is the worst possible place to put your chips for your bet on, because there's still positive and a negative outcomes. Just like if you were a theist, you can end up in heaven and hell for eternity. Except you can have a really good life or a really bad life or a cut short life. Like everything that I believe with atheism and you believe in theism is just cut short. It's like it's much shorter for me, right? And my beliefs. And if I wanted to, I can look at atheism, and I don't know where it is in the book, but I know that in the Bible it does make the claim that there are some people who are sleeping who just don't even know any better, and they'll be fine. Once judgment comes, they'll have a choice to either be with God or not be with God. And at that point, I would probably use decision theory. But I can't choose my beliefs. And looking at some forms of religion, if I stay ignorant, we'll say, I'm safer that way. I'm safer from all the other religions that way, rather than just worshiping a God. So I feel like, depending on which approach you take, atheism could be the safest, absolute safest choice that you can make.
So, tell me if I get you wrong in the first part. I think there are like two different objections, at least within that response, and that's fair. Like that's okay. I'm not trying to use that as criticism. And when I ask you if I get you right on this, the first part, I'm sincerely asking. Like I'm not trying to strawman you. It's just that some of these ideas are dense, and it's at the end of the day for me. So sometimes it's hard for me to, that's why I'm asking you if I got you right. Did you mean like maybe the proportion? Like if we have a greater proportion of a pleasureful life as an atheist compared to as a theist, is that what you meant?
I'm saying that I think we do. I think that that you're looking at eternity, and I'm looking at a finite amount of pleasure or displeasure. So
Okay.
I still feel they're equal. It's just one shorter. You know what I mean?
Well, we could let me try to address both of them. So the one in which we try to argue, let's say that we said maybe this is equally pleasurable as an atheist because I live a greater proportion of my life is more pleasurable on Earth. Decision theory wouldn't go based on proportions, though. It goes based on your maximal utility. So it basically looks at what is your total cumulative, you could say like pleasure points or happiness points that you have with one decision over another. And if the probability, when multiplied by that potential positive outcome, yields an answer that is bigger for a particular decision, namely like a bigger expected outcome, then you go with that one. And so given that there's like a bajillion, quadrillion, gazillion pleasure, happiness points in any sort of blissful heaven, it doesn't seem like we could get that on Earth in terms of a decision theory model. But the second thing is, you did bring up that some people would say that we can't choose our decisions. And I really think that, so philosophers would define this as either doxastic or basically doxastic voluntarism, the idea that we can choose our beliefs or our thoughts. And they would say that there is direct and indirect doxastic voluntarism. So for direct doxastic voluntarism, like me just saying right now I'm going to believe that the sun doesn't exist, well, I really can't do that. But let's say I wanted to instead change my mind a different way, a less direct way. And so maybe I start reading books, conspiracy theory books about how the sun really actually doesn't exist. It's just a hologram projection, by the government, something like that. Is if I can maybe read different sources, I can indirectly influence my beliefs. And another thing, though, something that has more empirical support is that there's a peer-reviewed paper, in particular a meta-analysis from Deschines, Stahl, Hansen, and Wonke, in which they discuss the truth effect. And in particular, when you read a certain passage over and over, you actually will find it more true, more probable than the first time you read it. And the reason is they think on a cognitive level, your brain is just able to process the information more. And as it processes it more, it becomes more believable just because the brain is able to process and make more sense of it. So you actually can, I think, indirectly influence your beliefs.
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, especially if you throw yourself in some kind of echo chamber, so you get the information from one specific side of things. You can come out of that echo chamber with a different mindset, because like the more information you have on something, I feel like the more potential it has to make more sense. No matter what that belief is, like whether Bigfoot exists, God exists, the sun doesn't exist, or whatever. Like I feel like you probably can get there or get closer to it. But is that good? Is that a thing we ought to do? Is that healthy for the mind? Is it this fly? Is it like the issue with Pascal's wager for me is that one is the belief factor, because I really don't think that you can just choose your beliefs, right? So I'm an atheist, and it's going to take a lot of work to change that, because it was a lot of work, and not like directly trying work to get out of Christianity. It just one day, after learning so much about astronomy and a little bit about evolution, my God got so small that I didn't believe in what I thought was God anymore. So I kind of became a deist, and then I became an atheist very shortly afterwards. So I think that you can get to truth without trying sometimes. One day I just realized I don't believe enough to be a theist anymore, right? And then I started doing research, and it affirmed my new disbeliefs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with Pascal Nature, I don't think it's intellectually honest enough to really take seriously.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think that so it looks like we've kind of come a long way in the sense that originally you had said you can't choose your beliefs, and now it sounds like you'd concede that you actually do have some ability to change your beliefs based on your choosing. And namely,
You can change them. You can just choose to do so. Do you know what I mean?
right.
Like,
Well,
change
we
happens,
agree.
but it's up to you.
Well, we agree that direct doxastic voluntarism doesn't work, and most philosophers agree that it doesn't work. We're in the same boat there, like we're already on the same team. But when it comes to indirect voluntarism, I think we actually agree there too, that you actually can change your beliefs. It's just that you're going to have to do it in a less direct way. And in particular, like I said, it's called the truth effect. And that was the meta-analysis that I cited, is that from a peer-reviewed psychology article, basically saying when you look at the evidence, this seems to work for a variety of different beliefs, and it seems to work consistently. Namely, by reading the same material, we can actually make ourselves come to believe in that idea more. So it looks like I've at least gotten you to concede indirect doxastic voluntarism.
Yes, I think I can agree with that. The only thing is, like, I don't think it always works. And like, if you're choosing something, then it's not direct anymore, right? It's you can just come to a new belief, but it doesn't just come. Like, it takes evidence either way. Would you agree with me on that side? Like,
Actually,
whatever evidence you're
from the meta-analysis that I've read, the paper I'm familiar with is it doesn't even actually have to be evidence. It actually can just be by reading through concepts, you find them more probable. So, for example, like, I'm not a Platonist, but if I read a book on Platonism, I might be more likely to believe that abstract object. And the reason is because conceptually it just makes more sense to me, because I've had more time for my brain to process the ideas, that now it seems more probable simply because it's clearer. And so it doesn't actually have to be evidential. So in the obvious case, Platonism is not going to have any sort of empirical support for it. But like I said, it's just thinking through the concepts.
right. Well, but would you not count that book that you're reading on Platonism as of some form of evidence or
It
experience?
could. And one thing I want to point out too is that I think before you said that it's not healthy to put ourselves in an echo chamber, is the peer-reviewed paper I was citing, it doesn't describe any sort of echo chamber. Like, it's just talking about, like, reading the material over and over, and it can be potentially evidence type material we read, but the effect seems to work even if it's not evidence. So, like, even if I just read a Wikipedia entry on Platonism, or better yet, a Plato Stanford entry on it, I'll be more likely to believe it after having read it, just by in virtue of, yeah. Even if it doesn't have arguments for Platonism, though.
Mm. No, and I don't think I specifically said that echo chambers aren't good or healthy. I feel like they can absolutely be not good, because, like, if you're blocking out every worldview but your own, you're going to miss a lot. But also, that's a good way to learn something. Like, you temporarily put yourself in an echo chamber to learn something. That's good. Whether you're trying to change a worldview or if you're just trying to learn something. Like, I accept astrophysics. I don't know a lot of astrophysics. But if I put myself in this little bubble, I can learn more about astrophysics, right? And I already adhere to it, but I can learn more about it. So depending on how you define echo chamber, I don't think it's unhealthy for the most part, as long as you let in other views every now and then, temporary echo chambers. Does that make sense?
That works for me. Yeah, I think that's a good nuance. That's a positive. There's a light side to it. Yeah, that's possible.
I try to stay. So, I don't know what part we should really focus on right now. Whether atheism is a good choice when you're looking at Pascal's wager, or is Pascal wagers a good argument whatsoever? What do you really want to focus on during this part of the discussion?
Well, since you asked, I want to hammer away on atheism, and I'm going to be completely honest. At least I'm putting my cards on the table. You saw that coming, Kyle, didn't you?
Bring it.
That's good. So,
too hardy.
So, well, we could talk about the atheist favoring God objection. I think this is one in the literature, and I think it's a fair, it's a pretty good one. Is one question I have for you is, first I should ask if you adhere to it. It sounds like you at least mentioned it as a potential concern, and if I understood you right, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it maybe something you think is a good objection? Namely, well, why should I believe in the Christian God? Because what if there's this God out there that rewards atheists? In which case, when you multiply that infinite reward from that atheist favoring God by my probability, the outcome is just as good as the Christian outcome.
I've heard this a couple times, but I mostly pulled it from yours and T Jump's conversation because I thought it was a good objection, but I only think it's as good as any other God. I don't think it's any better than any other God. So just to be clear on that. But we can go with that one.
Okay. I want to press you on that one. I just want to ask, why would you think that there's any evidence? What's the evidence that there is for this atheist favoring God compared to any sort of evidence for the Islamic God or the Hindu gods?
I think there's no evidence for it, which would be a good thing. But I don't think there's really any empirical, at least, evidence for any God. I think that any God that you or I would talk about can be minimized to be very small, to the point to where why even call him a God? Does that answer your question, or did I say?
I get what you're saying. Like, let's say you say, well, I don't think there's any evidence for the gods of these religions, and I think there's evidence for this atheist favoring God that purposely hides itself. One could take that position, but then and I think that you're taking a good answer to that. I think your answer is safe so far. I think where we can get into the thickets is where we might ask, why do you take that, in particular, the absence of evidence? Why do you take that as evidence of an atheist favoring God over genuine atheism or deism, in which case a God maybe created things and he doesn't reward the atheist or the theist, or maybe even a God who purposely hid himself but gets a sick kick out of rewarding the theist?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't super adhere to this, right? Like I said, I thought it was an interesting argument. I think it's I think it's a good objection. I don't think there's an atheistic God. I do think it is a better argument, only because, I think it's a better argument as much as it's not a better argument. I think it makes it just as infallible as the the philosophical God of the Bible. Like, you can't knock him down, right? If there's an atheistic God, I don't think there's any evidence for him. If there's an atheistic God, he wouldn't want any evidence for him. So a pure atheist could be led into the atheist heaven. But I don't believe that there's any kind of God. Or if there was, it would be an atheistic God. It would be one either that allows atheists in, or he just doesn't give a shit. He's more of like a deistic God. He helped make the universe or whatever, and he's done with it. Or I don't think there's really any God at all, because I think it's just like a even if you go with the cosmological argument, okay, well, how did it happen? God did it. I'm like, cool. Well, then where did God come from? Like I said, like, I'm pretty much a hard atheist. I don't think there's any room for any God, really. And I wouldn't want to be in the atheist God's heaven if his morals didn't align at least somewhat with mine. Just like the God of the Bible.
Go ahead.
That was it. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me so I want to run an idea by you, and you can let me know what you think, because I was thinking through this earlier, and it gave me a potential out, actually. I think there's a potential out for the atheist like you, or any atheist who uses the atheist favoring God objection. I think it comes with a major cost, though, which is it's going to be pretty surprising. It's theism, and here's how it is. So, and I'm not trying to just be cute. I actually, bizarrely, as strange as it is, I think it actually leads you to theism. Here's why. So let's say we said, let's say I'm you, Mac, and I say, well, I would give atheism a 98% chance, right? That's my initial coming into this conversation. You might say that, and then you might say, well, I also give all that 2% that's left. I split that among the thousands of religions that are out there, right? So they all get like a tiny fraction of a percentage point. That's probably what a lot of atheists are. And if I were to say that that's the case, we might then ask, well, if I have that 98% probability with regards to philosophical atheism, namely what we're using like classic atheism, what scholars would use, namely the proposition that there is no God. So I say that 98% rests on the proposition there is no God. But, and, let's say I say the reasons I have for that are a lack of evidence. I think, so I use the argument from divine hiddenness, and I use the problem of evil, stuff like that. Well, then you might ask, well, what reason do I have to prefer thinking that it's genuine atheism for that 98% rather than maybe it's 50-50. Maybe I should think that part of that 98% stands for genuine atheism, but part of that 98% stands for this idea that there's a God hiding himself. And he's a sick prankster who wants to, punish all the religious believers. Well, if I were to think that, probability theorists would say that, a lot of them at least would say, when you partition your probability, so I've got this 98% probability that I give to atheism. Now I've got to decide how much am I going to assign to genuine atheism compared to some sort of theist, like the view that there's a God hiding himself out there somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to split my 98%, but I couldn't do so arbitrarily. I couldn't just say, well, I happen to, and I'm not saying you would say this, but I'm saying if anybody were to say, well, I just go with genuine atheism, I assign that like 97% of my 98% probability, and that 1%, I give that to the atheist favoring God position, right? Like, I couldn't just do that willy-nilly. I'd have to have a reason, right?
Right.
So, okay, so we're in the same boat there. So most probability theorists that I'm familiar with would say we should partition our 98% down the middle if we don't have any reason to prefer one possible world over another. And so you'd say, well, I split my 98%, so I give 49% to this genuine atheism, and I give 49% to this idea that, well, maybe there's a God, but it's not very likely. Well, I'm sorry, maybe there's a God and he's hiding himself, right? You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it seems reasonable I'd split it right down the middle. But then when I add that 2% back in, I've got 2% that's divided among all these different forms of theism, and 49% that is thinking that there's this, deity hiding itself. So when you add them together, you get a 51% probability for theism overall, which leads you to be at least maybe not a theist, but it makes you say that you think it's more probable that there is a deity rather than not. And it seems to me that no matter how you do the math, when you partition the probabilities, you're stuck with theism. So it might be a solution to the wager, but you'd have to concede that theism is more probable than atheism, which seems like a negative cost that you'd rather not have to take the position of, right?
I see what you're saying. Can I tell you the way that I kind of go about it?
Yeah.
The way I kind of look at it is, if there is a God, well, one, that negates polytheism, right? If there's a God of gods, that doesn't negate polytheism, but he is the God of gods, and like that's what you should go with. But then there's different versions of God: Allah, Yahweh, Jehovah. And not all of them can be correct. Like one of them is the God of gods, or the only God that there is. So only really one of those can be right. So I feel like, again, it just kind of comes down to a 50-50 chance. But you can logically destroy a lot of arguments for gods in general by seeing, is there a big God? Is there one big dude, right? And seeing how that's that easy to crush all the other arguments, why be left with that one? And why take evidence over here and logic and reason too with my stance? I feel like, because it's not just a lack of evidence why I disbelieve in God. Like I said, my God got so small, like he was doing so little, that why is there a God? Like why do I say there's a God when he obviously doesn't do much, or he just snapped his fingers, lets everything do its thing? Well, then he's not really doing anything still. He just did something one time. Like he got so small that I didn't need a God anymore. And then that wasn't the end of it. That was just the start of my atheism. It went on to moral arguments. I didn't want there to be a God after I was an atheist. It's like, wow, the God of the Bible seems like kind of a moral monster. I wouldn't really even want into his heaven to worship him for all the death that he's caused, all the pain that he's caused, and a lot of the decisions that he's made. So there's a lot more to my atheism than just a lack of evidence, is what I kind of wanted to put out there. And also, I wanted to show how easy it is, even for you, to say, all these other gods are probably not, or at least 99.9% of all the other gods are not valid. Right? So it's really easy to knock out all of the other arguments, or at least all of the other arguments from the one that isn't true. Say, if there is one true theistic God, even deistic. Seeing that it's that easy, I feel like that raises, I don't know what percentage, but like it raises the probability for atheism as a belief. Or just,
that's a really,
in this case, belief.
That's a really interesting idea. I think that we definitely could keep going, and it's a really important point to address. But at the same time, I know that we probably will have to do Q&A soon, because I can't. I can hang around longer than I planned, but I can't hang around too much longer than I planned. So if it's okay,
sure,
I'm willing to have you have the last word, Mac. And I think that is definitely a substantive response that is worthy of an answer. But because one of us has to end, I'm going to give you, if it's okay with Kyle and Steve, I'm willing to give you the last word, and we could go to the Q&A. And I appreciate all of your thoughts.
thank you, and I've really appreciated this discussion. Kyle and Steve, as always, I fucking love the show, and I'm really glad you hosted this
Do you want it?
this discussion. And yeah, I'm fine with it going on, or I'm fine with it stopping. But thank you, James,
Sure.
also
I mean,
for the
well,
discussion.
I think he's got to run soon, so we want to get some questions in. He's just going to give you the last word to wrap up any thoughts that you have or anything like that, if you needed to, or are you good?
I feel like what I just said pretty much summed it up.
Okay. So guys, if you have any questions, ask them now and tag me in the live chat. I'll run over to super chats real quick to see if anybody's sent any of those in really quickly. So MDH, do you have any, while I'm pulling this up, anything you want to
I
wrap up
do.
with?
I want to say, peeps, everybody watching, please subscribe. They've got such great content here. Give it a like. Like I said, I honestly, if you're new to NonSequitur, I can tell you they're constantly putting out new content, new ideas, and so I just appreciate you guys. I always said I was going to give you guys a shout out video, and then I'm sorry I never did it. I failed you, but I don't worry.
How dare you?
You've
My
been
life
busy
is
with your
young.
own
I still got time to do this shout out video. And so, but I can in the meantime tell people I loved it here.
Thank you.
So if you are new to this channel, run.
Subscribe.
Okay, so here are a couple of questions from the super chats. First one is from 0132-132. Thank you for your super chat. Shouldn't we try to kill Yahweh to prevent millions, probably billions, from suffering eternally? Any chance times infinity equals infinity? Am I right? Maybe that's a tongue-in-cheek question.
Can you say it one more time? I'm so sorry. It's that it's just late in the day. And
sure. It says, shouldn't we ultimately try to kill Yahweh to prevent millions, probably billions, from suffering eternally? Any chance times infinity equals to infinity? Am I right?
Oh, that's interesting. But I mean, I'm willing to take it seriously as a thought experiment. Like I actually think it's interesting. If as an atheist, if you think that Yahweh's, I mean, on an atheist view, I understand that you guys think that Yahweh is, torturing billions of people. And I mean, for me, I wouldn't. And Kyle, we got to have this conversation once, and it was a really substantive and good discussion where I actually think that people are, and I'm not going to say that I'm any better. I'm probably more deserving than most, that we are deserving of punishment from a just God, and that he gave his son because he loved us so much, and we have that free way out. But so I think that I don't think God is unjust if he punishes people for eternity, because I think we have sinned against him. So it's hard for me to answer that as a theist, but I'll let Mac respond on behalf of the atheist.
Cool. And I'm not speaking for all atheists, because I know that there's a lot of pro-God atheists out there. Like, they're atheists, they don't believe, but like they wish God existed. Part of that is for that there would be a heaven where they could see their family again in, and also I know a lot of people like the idea of heaven and hell, like you get eternal pleasure or you get eternal punishment for being a shit during your time here on earth. But for me, I just don't believe. But if there was a Yahweh, a God, whatever, I wouldn't say we should kill him to keep everyone from suffering. I would take more of a humanistic stance and say that, like, hey, dude, like, we just don't like you. Leave us alone. We would appreciate if you could just go away. Like, we don't need to hate you. We don't need to like try to kill you. Also, you could just, and we're dead if you've created everything, right? So just like leave us alone, or just let us live our lives, or our eternal lives, the way we would want to. Like, I don't think we would need or have to kill him. Or also, I think that would give us the moral low ground, which I think God already has. So I take it from him.
Okay. The Let's see. I'm trying to get to these questions first before we get to just the comments. Where was that one at? Okay. What's your views on this is from Wellington Smith. Thank you, Wellington Smith. It says he would love to hear your views on Hebrews 6:4-6, where we who were once believers cannot return to the fold. Isn't he wasting his time?
That's a great question. Wow. That's really insightful. To be honest, like I'd have to look at the context in terms of it being, written thousands of years ago in a different continent. And that's what I mean by context. So there's definitely like exegetical reasons to read it in depth for me to be able to give an answer on that. And so it's really hard for me to answer it on the spot in any sort of educated way, to be honest, because I haven't read very thoroughly on it. I'm so sorry. My gut says that I would return to the faith based on more broadly in a basic exegetical principle, or like the science of interpretation of the Bible would say that we interpret difficult passages with easier passages. And one easier passage is, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe in him would have eternal life. And so given that it says whosoever, it doesn't make an exception. I would use that clearer passage to interpret the more difficult one. Namely, I think that they should still turn to God, that God still wants them.
Okay.
The next question is from Sigfredo Sarabia. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to. Yes, I did. Was the question more or less, would we, like, if I'm an atheist, I'm not going to make it back to theism. So why should James waste his time? Is that pretty much what it was saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I would say, I would look at Ezekiel, where it says, if you don't try to save everyone in this city, then their blood is on your hands. And then I would say that in defense for theism, but then also say that's contradictory. That's just another reason to not take the Bible super duper seriously. And and I can't remember exactly what James said. I had something to say to it, but my main point is just that I've blasphemed the Lord. Like I said, he doesn't exist and he's shitty, right? So I'm pretty much unsavable.
Modern day Hysteria, can you do me hold on one second. Can you do me a favor, modern day, can you mute while when you're not talking, because it's kind of starting to pick up a little bit back there.
You muted. Thank you, James. I wouldn't even want to go back. This is to what James was saying. I wouldn't want to go back to biblical Christianity, even if I wouldn't want to bring anyone back to it, and I want to go back to myself, because there are better moral theories to go off of. Like it's just not even worth it to me. You can find better moral and a humanism, and I'm sure other things that I haven't even looked into. But that's my answer to it. Waste of time because it's a contradiction, and it's just waste time.
Okay. The next one is from Sigfredo Sarabia. He says, if atheists / agnostics don't believe in God, why do they think they have authority to take concepts of God as true for argumentation? You want to take that one, Mac?
I missed the very first part because I knocked my headphones out.
If atheists or agnostics that don't believe in God, why do they think they have authority to take concepts of God as true for argumentation?
Awesome. I love that question, and I hope a theist asked it. I think because at least from my view, a lot of these moral goods, a lot of these concepts come from before the biblical God. They come even before some religion, I think. Like people treated each other well before religion came along and told us how to treat people. Even when religion came along, like the belief in God, like the commandments didn't come along until like the second book of the Bible, like, you know, thou shalt not kill. So like we didn't know that for an entire book of the Bible, which was like a couple thousand years. I don't think we're taking anything. I think it's just there is a little bit of an inherency there. Like it's a meme. Like we pass this down from generation to generation. If you don't want to have an awful life, don't be shitty to the people around you. We're not taking that from the Bible. And there's a lot that you can build off of to make a good society and live a good life from just there. And I'd like to just shout out Steven Pinker's book, Better Angels of Our Nature. And it can show where people were decent to each other without Christianity, just to say the least.
Okay, anything you want to add on that, MBH?
I have points that I disagree on, but more to get to more questions, I'm willing to, you know, like he gave his answer, and I think they wanted his answer more than mine, so set to go.
The next one is if I were to believe. This is from Cat Booper. If I were to believe in a God and there turns out to be an afterlife, do you get a choice, or can I just die, or am I forced to go to heaven?
Oh, I think so if I understand right, they're asking, like, if I were to die and find out that I bet on the right God, could I choose to just not exist, or to go to hell even, or to go to heaven?
Right.
That's a great question. I don't know. Biblically, I can't draw from a passage to answer that question. That's a really good question, and I don't know.
Okay. Let's go to now. I think I just got another one in. Sorry, it's taking a second to load. Is Pascal's wager true from an agnostic point?
Is it true from an agnostic position?
The agnostic God, because then I'm good to go if there's an agnostic God, right?
Oh, brilliant! I've never thought of this. Okay, so I think they may be asking, like, could there be a God who favors an agnostics like Steve McRae?
Right.
Wow. Okay, interesting. That's fascinating. I hadn't even thought of that. So they value people who are uncertain. That would definitely be one you'd have to. I'm trying to think of. Obviously, it wouldn't be a form of, like, you wouldn't clump it into theism, but you wouldn't clump it into the proposition that there is no God, because that's making a positive assertion. You definitely make sense.
Any God would be theism. Even the atheist God would fall under theism.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, if
it would be, theism would be false in that case, and that theism would be true because they're contradictories. So, but it still would be the case that God exists, just happens to be a God that favors atheist.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess, in an ontological sense, it would be a form of theism. And I guess if you even thought that there was a God that favored you, that's maybe why Steve's an agnostic. He thinks there's a God out there that favors agnostics.
No, because we're both, like Gray and I, we're still screwed either way, right? I mean, he doesn't have any God beliefs. So if God's just saying, hey, you don't believe in me, you're going to hell, I'm in the same boat he is, because I don't believe in God's either, right? So if there's an atheist God or an agnostic God, I got better odds. Yeah, that's all.
He
doesn't necessarily believe he's holding.
I'm in deep thought.
Okay, so I think that was it for those questions in the super chat. Let me get through the rest of these super chats real quick, and then if we have time, I'll ask any that the live chat actually has.
Yeah, I have a question for Modern Day too after this.
Okay. Praxis, Praxis, thank you for only allowing me to say your first name. He says, just the first name, Kyle. I know you have a hard time with last names. That's very true. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. There's one of these every single show now. Caleb Ahia says, "Oi, Kyle, fix your human suit. Your lizard tongue is showing." I know, and I'm going to get reprimanded like crazy when we have our Illuminati meeting tomorrow. But it was just a simple oversight. I have to take whatever they give. Bram SLI1. Pascal's wager isn't logical. Belief shouldn't come from coercion. There's either evidence to support it, or it's just bullshit. 0132. Suppose that you've been given a $1 and flip a coin. If heads, you double it and flip again. If tails, you keep it and nothing else happens. How much, on average, would this opportunity be worth? That's a deep question.
That last one, the coin one, was more compelling than the first one. What was the coin one? That sounded really interesting. Can you say the coin one one more time?
Sure. Suppose that you've been given, or suppose that you've given $1 to flip a coin. I think he means suppose that you're given $1 to flip a coin. If heads, you double it, and then you flip again. If it lands on tails, you keep it and nothing else happens. So basically, you're given $1 every time you flip a coin, right? And if it lands on heads, you get another $1, and then you get to flip again. If it lands on tails, you get to keep it and nothing else happens. How much is that opportunity worth?
The opportunity would be, I think it would be, you'd multiply the potential. You'd say I have a 50-50, I have a 0.5 probability that I'm going to get the reward. And you multiply that by the $1, you get like the potential outcome is like, I think that he's getting at the point that once you have the $1, you have a potential for, and you wouldn't lose it, right? So if you flip the coin again, you get to win $1. But if it's head, if it's tails, though, you don't lose the $1, right?
Right.
So,
well,
okay.
He says the expected value of the thought experiment is infinity because you double each time.
Yeah, so this reminds me of an objection from Alan Hayek, and it's, I think, the most strong objection. It's the strongest objection. You should keep going. That's the rational thing to do, is you should maximize. But this isn't a problem with Pascal's wager. This is a problem with decision theory. Every theory has its problems. I don't think it's a reason to abandon decision theory, though I would say it is a legitimate problem. It's something that deserves an answer, and that hasn't. It's very difficult to give a good answer to, even among actual probability theorists, which I'm not.
Okay,
you got a good point.
Nacho Witness says, "Go sub to Gray Skeptic Mac." Excuse me.
Please do. Please do.
Nacho Witness again says, question for Mac: where do I find more of you on YouTube?
On my channel. I think it's www.youtube.com/Gray Skeptic. I think Nacho set that up for me. So thank you, Nacho. Nacho's awesome.
We'll link it in the description as well. How much time do you have modern day?
I actually should go. I promised that, like, basically there's a person waiting to do an event on my channel that I promised we'd start around 9:30.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming in. You can go ahead and go if you need to. We'll close out the show and kind of discuss a little bit here.
Is it okay if I just invite people, once Non-Sequitur is done, and after they subscribe and like the Non-Sequitur, if people would like, we're having a debate on modern day debate tonight, and we'd love to have you. You will see on our featured channels, Non-Sequitur show is there because we love your guys' stuff at Modern Day Debate. So thank you for having me. I'm sorry I have to run.
Give us the link. I'll put it in the video description.
Yeah.
Give us the link so I can put it in the video description so people can head over there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you guys, and I won't keep you any longer. I hope you have a great night. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Mac.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Take care.
And we know it's late, and we're not going to stay on long. Too, I'm just going to give Steve any announcements that he wants to make, and then we'll let you guys, if you want to carry over to modern day debate and watch what's going on over there, you can do that. Steve, you have any last minute thoughts to wrap up?
No, well, he has to go, so he can't really answer my question. So maybe a Gray Skeptic can or something. I don't know. But I was just going to basically say something along the lines of, look at, I do believe that most people are dogmatic and voluntarist. However, that doesn't preclude the ability to have some kind of choice. But does God want somebody to have an irrational belief? If I believe that, if I am worried about Pascal as a wager, and I'm worried about the argumentum ad baculum fallacy that I do believe that it is, but I am scared to death of this eternity of damnation, and I will myself, for whatever means, that I have this belief now that God exists. That belief is not justified, it's not rational, and it's based solely on fear rather than any reason to have that belief. Is that something that a rational God would want somebody to have? Because that seems to me to be a contradiction. A rational God would not want somebody to have an irrational belief like that, especially if it's a salvational issue. That's how I would particularly attack that part of the argument. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think that really depends on the Christian God. Like, I've seen that it's upwards of 40,000 different versions of just the Christian God in the world, right? So I think it really depends on the version of that God.
Well, he's really kind of is pushing that narrative, right? I mean, this argument only really is useful to, well, not even useful, but it's just used by somebody pushing a specific deity of their choice, right?
Here's my question,
I mean,
Steve.
of course, it could be an irrational God that wants people to be rational, but
right.
So what?
The crux of this argument basically is that, what if you're wrong, right?
What if you're wrong?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's a carrot and stick approach. It really is a risk versus reward. What if you're wrong? But I would have then gone into the argument. There's a lot of things to be concerned about societal wise if you're wrong about having false beliefs rather than individual, salvation issues, right? Or what happens in eternity.
Here's my question with it though. Like if you're God, right, and you're seeing this, you're seeing that there's a certain amount of people that are only believing in you and doing the things and going through the motions and the ropes out of fear that they could be wrong and you could be sent to hell for it. Like, to me, that's worse than the atheist who just goes, I have questions that I don't think none of this makes sense. To me, that's an earnest search for truth, and the other one is just doing it so that you don't get roasted alive for eternity. That to me is worse than atheism.
Yeah, well, that literally is exactly my argument. I mean, that's what I was saying before. Look, if Gray Skeptic doesn't believe in deities because he's searching, but he just really hasn't found anything. He has no reason to believe. God hasn't given him anybody any reasons to believe or send anybody to him to convince him, right? So blame God that he doesn't believe. But if let's say you believe that God does exist and you're doing it out of fear, you have no justification for it, you have no rational reason to believe in God, then if I'm the deity and I'm looking at both of you, why would I want somebody to be in your position just to believe in me out of fear rather than the honest person here who's being rational to himself that he's not going to hold a position that he doesn't feel like he's comfortable having no justification for? To me, God looking at you going, Kyle's better off, is an irrational deity.
I get it because of my hair, like obviously.
Probably.
Oh, there might be a God of hair though. If there's a God of hair, you're golden, man. You're going to heaven regardless, right? You're done.
I think, see, that's what I was saying with it depends on the God, because one of the first things that I thought when you were saying this the first time is that there's some versions of God that plant dinosaur fossils, right?
I don't think people actually believe that.
We all know that's true.
Right. So, and then also, I again can't remember his name, but I put it in the notes.
Joe?
God damn it. No, Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard. I'll get there. Sorry.
Sure.
See, I'm awful. He says that it needs no logic. There shouldn't be any logic in the belief for God. That's the beauty of it. You just believe in him for the faith. Like that's what he wants.
It's a leap into faith.
Yes, it's a leap to faith.
It wasn't translated leap of faith. It was translated leap into faith.
Leap into faith.
Yeah.
Cool.
Leap into faith,
I'll,
correct.
Leap out of it.
So
Leap out of it,
I
guys.
think
Leap out of it.
really just leap out of it. I think it really so by that it really depends. Like if we're thinking of a logically consistent God, then no. But who's to say that logically consistent God
Well, that was the
exists?
point. I mean, that's what I was saying. If there's a God out there that's going to be irrational, then he would be more likely to save somebody who's in an irrational state. But again, I think
He's
the
pretty
probability of that
irrational.
is extremely low. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me, and I rather believe that if God does exist, he's rational, and if he's rational, he's not going to send somebody to hell just because they didn't believe. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Have you seen what he did in the Old
Doesn't-
Testament, Steve? He dashed babies' heads against the rocks, and
Well,
He's-
I mean, one
he's
can make the
rational.
argument that people just put that shit in there and wasn't actually from God and they got it all wrong. Well, you can make that argument. I don't think that's the case. I think that people did put it in there. I don't think any of that's from God, but
how dare
that's the argument they would use. Yeah, I wouldn't make sense
Right.
to the God. I mean, I've already said that the God that does a lot of the atrocities in the Bible would not make sense as a deity you would want to worship. That I agree with.
No,
That was the case.
yeah,
Why
but
call him God?
I think
That's what I always say. Why even call it God?
that's what you ultimately have to boil this argument down to. All it is it's love for something out of fear of not loving it, or the repercussions of what's going to happen to you for not loving it. And to me, I think that's worse than somebody that's earnestly looking for answers and the truth and just doesn't find those answers because the actual deity, knowing what they want or knowing what it would take to convince them, doesn't provide that. So ultimately, I don't think that person can be damned while letting this person who it's a fake love. I mean, it's completely fake. It's not genuine. Why would you want that?
Well, it's argument from the penis bone. Remember, argumenting that back at him. But what would make more sense for God to be looking at people like Brett Keane and G-Man and the most horrific people we've seen, the Catholic pedophiles. All these people that
I think they're Steve, that's not.
But if God saves them, but doesn't save somebody like, well, you guys don't believe it exists. I mean, you guys actually believe that there's no God, but just doesn't save somebody who just doesn't have a belief either way or something. That makes no sense to me. I mean, why would he choose somebody who's because they happen to have a belief, but they're morally reprehensible people? What is more valuable, a belief that he exists, or to be ethical and morally upright? Which has more value to this deity here?
Who would play games you love in heaven, Steve, if I wasn't there?
See, God is just whatever our inner consciousness wants him to be. That's why there's more than 40,000 different versions of the Christian God. He's whoever you morally need him to be. And I think it just takes more away from it than it does gives. And I hope James is listening still or goes back and listens to it. My one of the main issues that I have for Pascal's wager is, it's just like, where would you rather be, right? But it gives no truth value to it. That's what kind of kills the argument, is that it has no truth value whatsoever.
I don't think he argues any of that changes ontology, right? He's not going to argue just because you believe one way or another it's going to actually create a God or make a God exist or have any effect on reality whatsoever. It's just he's just saying, look, it's better to believe than not believe, and I happen to think that that's a horrible way to approach any kind of epistemology.
It's better to believe
unless you're talking about very properly basic beliefs, then you should believe. But
it all boils down to pleasure points. But this was actually a really good, I think, discussion. I'm glad you guys were able to come on and have it with us. Steve briefly mentioned there for a second, Brett Keane. I hate to do this to you all, and I hate mentioning him after he came on here and we did our thing, but this is justified. Everybody knows my obsession with the ASMR world, and we did a little bit of a game the other night where we were, making up random words and pairing it with ASMR, and you could go and search and see if it was actually existed. Well, wouldn't you know what wound up in my my subscription feed yesterday?
What's that?
I've already blessed Steve with this. I
will never sleep again.
But yeah, when you think sleep, like right when we go to play something that's relaxing and you're laying down, and you're like, oh, I just need something to help me drift away. That there's nothing that will help you do that more than listening to the sounds of a manatee, right? Because now you can go to Brett Keen's channel, and Brett Keen has Brett Keen ASMR.
This is not a joke.
This is not a. I wish it was a joke. I wished it was a joke. This is not a joke.
It would be a very bad. This is like something I would expect drunken peasants to make to go do, right? To make a parody video or satire video of Brett Keen doing ASMR. Nope, he did it himself. He literally is a living parody of himself.
However, it's not even ASMR. He doesn't.
No.
I don't think he understands what it is because he's singing a song. It says Brett Keen ASMR, but he's singing. He's singing.
Yeah, I don't think he gets the gist of it either.
So on that, real quick, Kyle, I don't know if I love you more or if I hate you a little bit. But since you introduced the ASMR stuff on whichever episode that was, I looked into it a little bit. And now there's a channel and a half. There's a channel and a half that I like, and I do fall asleep to now. So thank you, and maybe fuck you just a little bit. But
you don't just get
judge.
into ASMR a little bit. People who go down the ASMR route, there
a whole lot that I like, but I like GB. I like GB. I don't know if you know.
There's a I don't know that one, but there's a dark world to ASMR, and slowly but surely we're going to shed light on it here on this channel. In 2019, I'm going in on ASMR, but with a game. We have a really cool game that we're going to play. Also, starting in 2 weeks, I believe it's the week after we have the guy from the Flat Earth Society. Friday Night Fights will also feature an interactive bingo game that you can play along with us as the Friday Night Fights are going on. I'm building the board now, but it contains all the arguments that they use, all the words that they use, the trigger words, the dropities, the buoyancy, that sort of gradient, pressure gradients, all of that stuff is going to be on there. And the winners will win a shirt or something each time. We'll figure that out, but we'll give something to the winners each round. So you can play at home, and it'll be really cool to do that while the show actually goes on. So, okay, let's droppity. I think that's a good stopping point. It's always good to end on droppity and Brett Keen. Boy, it started so strong. But yeah, thank you, Grace Skeptic Mac. Thank you, Modern Day Debates. Now, go and check out his channel. When you close out from here, they're doing something on there. Go support him. Really, two top-notch guys. It's very strange having such a polite debate tonight. It almost feels wrong. That's how right it is.
You know what? It kind of eased us out of the holidays. You know.
Yeah.
Eased us out. You know, we're going to ramp it back up. We'll get back to those dumpster fires.
Bring me into a moral argument.
You know what never does feel wrong, though, Steve?
Eating an air thingy, whatever those things are called.
No.
Airhead.
Being back with you guys tomorrow at 8 p.m. We'll see you with Dr. Don Prothero, and we'll be back here at 8 o'clock Eastern.
Right.
Rock on, or whatever you do.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.